Welcome to this channel. Before you watch this video, it's a good idea to press the subscribe, like, and share buttons with your friends so that this channel continues to grow. Thank you. I moved to Alaska 2 years ago for a job at a small logging company near a town called Talkeetna. I had no family there, no friends. Just me and a small cabin about 3 miles from the nearest road. The kind of place where the silence at night is so thick, it feels like it has weight. I thought I would love it. I thought the isolation would be peaceful. The first few weeks were fine. I would wake up early, drive my truck down the dirt path to the main road, work all day cutting and hauling timber, then come home, eat something simple, and sleep. The forest around my cabin was dense, full of spruce trees so tall you had to tilt your head all the way back just to see the tops. Beautiful, honestly. During the day, at least. It was a Thursday in late October when I first noticed something felt wrong. I had come home a little earlier than usual because the crew boss sent us back early due to incoming weather. I remember parking my truck and stepping out, and the forest was completely silent. Not the normal quiet I was used to. This was different. No wind, no birds, not even the sound of branches settling. Just nothing. I stood there for almost a minute listening, and the hair on the back of my neck slowly rose up the way it does when your body knows something before your brain does. I shook it off and went inside. I made some soup, watched something on my laptop, and went to bed. But I woke up around 2 in the morning for no reason at all. No noise, no bad dream. I just opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. I lay there for a while, and then I turned my head toward the window next to my bed. There was a shape outside. I want to be careful how I describe this, because I know how it sounds. It was not a monster. It was not some creature with glowing eyes. It was just a shape. Tall, thin, standing very still between 2 trees, maybe 30 feet from my window. The way the moonlight hit it, I could see it was too tall to be a normal person, but the shape of it was almost human. Long arms, narrow body, standing perfectly still. I did not move. I did not breathe. I just stared at it, and it stood there. I watched it for what felt like 10 minutes, though it was probably less. But then the clouds shifted, and the moonlight changed, and it was gone. Just trees again. I told myself it was a dead tree I had not noticed before. I almost believed it too, until the next night when I looked out before bed and counted the trees carefully. Nothing unusual. And the night after that, I checked again. Still nothing. I started to think I had imagined the whole thing. Then 3 days later, I came home and found my firewood stacked differently. I know that sounds small, but I had stacked it a specific way against the left side of the cabin, and now it was neatly restacked against the right side. Every single piece. Moved while I was at work. I drove back to the main road and called my crew boss. He laughed and said it was probably a bear messing around. I did not argue with him, but bears do not stack wood. They knock it over, they scatter it, they do not reorganize it. I started sleeping with the lights on after that. The next week passed slowly. I kept my head down at work and tried not to think too much about the firewood. I bought a cheap security camera from a store in town and set it up facing the front of the cabin. Nothing fancy, just something battery-powered that recorded motion. I felt a little better after that. Like, at least I would have an answer one way or another. 3 nights after I set it up, the camera stopped recording at 2:17 in the morning. Not because the battery died. The battery was brand new. It just stopped. The footage before that point showed nothing. Just the front yard, the tree line, the usual darkness. And then the file ended, Clean cut like someone had pressed stop. I did not sleep much after that. The thing that really started to get to me was not any single event. It was the feeling of being watched during the day. I would be outside splitting wood or walking to my truck, and I would get this heavy feeling on the back of my neck, like eyes pressing into my skin. I would turn around and look at the tree line and see nothing. Just spruce trees packed so tight together that anything could be standing 10 feet inside them, and you would never see it from where I was standing. I started noticing other small things. A coffee mug I always left by the sink would be on the table when I got home. A pair of boots I kept by the door would be moved a few feet. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed danger. Just small shifts, the kind that make you question your own memory more than anything else. That was the worst part. I genuinely started wondering if I was losing my mind. I called my sister in Oregon one evening and told her some of it. Not everything, just enough. She asked if I had been sleeping okay and told me isolation can do strange things to people. I said, yeah, probably that. I did not tell her about the shape outside the window. I did not tell her about the camera. About 2 weeks after the firewood incident, I decided to walk the tree line. It was a Saturday afternoon, full daylight, no reason to be scared. I just wanted to look, wanted to feel like I had some control over the situation. I walked along the edge of the trees slowly, looking at the ground. I was not sure what I was looking for exactly. I found it about 40 feet from the left side of my cabin, or a small area where the ground was flattened and the low branches on 2 trees were broken at about chest height, like something had been standing there for a long time, pressing against the branches. The dirt in that spot was packed down hard, and all of it was facing my bedroom window. Whatever had been standing there had a perfect straight line of sight to the exact spot where I slept every night. I went inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against the wall for about an hour. I was not panicking. I was past panicking. I was just very still and very quiet, trying to think clearly. Someone or something had been standing in those trees watching me sleep, regularly enough to flatten the ground and snap the branches. That evening, I decided I would leave in the morning, pack what I could fit in the truck, and go. And I felt okay with that decision. Calm, even. I made dinner, cleaned up, and got ready for bed earlier than usual. I checked the window before I turned the light off. The shape was back. Same spot as before. Same impossible height. Same stillness. But this time it was closer. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the corner of my bedroom with every light in the cabin on, holding a hunting knife I kept under my bed, watching the window until the sky outside slowly turned gray with morning. When the sun was fully up, I looked out, and there was nothing there. Just trees. Just the same quiet forest I had been staring at for months. I packed my truck in about 20 minutes. I did not fold anything neatly or think about what I was leaving behind. I just grabbed my bag, my laptop, my important documents, and I left. Navran, I remember pulling down the dirt path toward the main road and feeling this enormous wave of relief wash over me. Like I could breathe again for the first time in weeks. I stayed at a motel in Talkeetna for 2 nights while I figured out my next move. I called my crew boss and told him I had a family emergency and needed to quit. He was understanding about it. I felt guilty lying, but I was not about to explain the real reason. I booked a flight back to Oregon for the following week and spent the days in between just sitting in the motel room, eating fast food, watching television, and slowly starting to feel normal again. On my last night in the motel, I made the mistake of going through my phone photos. I had taken pictures of the flattened area in the trees, close-up shots of the broken branches and the packed dirt. I scrolled through them slowly. They looked exactly as I remembered. Dark soil, snapped branches at chest height, the visible line through the trees toward my cabin window. And then I got to the last photo in the sequence, and my stomach dropped completely. I had not noticed it when I was standing there in the daylight. I was too focused on the ground, on the broken branches. But in the photo, further back in the trees, maybe 20 feet deeper into the forest behind the flattened spot, there was a shape. Tall and thin, half hidden behind a spruce tree, with what looked like a long arm resting against the bark. It was not looking at the cabin in the photo. It was looking directly at me, at where I had been standing when I took the picture. It had been right behind me the whole time. I put my phone face down on the bed and sat very still for a long time. I thought about the drive from the cabin to the motel. 3 miles of dirt road through dense forest before hitting the main road. I had not seen anything. But I had also not been looking. I had just been driving fast with my eyes straight ahead, grateful to be leaving. I deleted the photos that night. All of them. I know people online always say that is the wrong move, that you should keep the evidence. But I did not want them on my phone. I did not want to look at that image again before bed. I flew back to Oregon 4 days later. I have been here for 8 months now. I live in a normal neighborhood with streetlights and neighbors close by, and I sleep with no problems most nights. I do not think about Alaska much during the day, but sometimes at night I wake up for no reason. No sound, no bad dream. I just open my eyes and stare at the ceiling. And every single time, before I can stop myself, I turn my head toward the window. So far, there's been nothing there. So far. I thought moving back to Oregon would fix everything. And for a while it did. The neighborhood I moved into was exactly what I needed. Kids riding bikes in the street during the day, neighbors who waved at you from their driveways, a gas station 2 blocks away with lights so bright you could see them from my bedroom window at night. Normal, comfortable, loud, in the way that cities are loud. I slept fine. I ate fine. I started going to the gym again and calling my sister on weekends. Life felt like it was stitching itself back together. Then about 3 months after I got back, I noticed the tree. There is a small park across the street from my apartment building. Just a strip of grass with a few old oak trees and a bench. Nothing special. I had looked at it every single day since I moved in, without thinking twice about it. But one morning, I was standing at my kitchen window drinking coffee, and I looked out at the park and something felt different. I stared at it for a while, trying to figure out what had changed. The bench was there. The grass was there. The trees were the same. And then I saw it. Between 2 of the oak trees, half turned away, standing completely still while people walked past on the sidewalk without looking up. The same height, the same narrow shape, the same long arms hanging slightly too far down. I put my coffee mug down very carefully on the counter. My hands were steady, but my chest felt like it was full of cold water. I watched it for a long time. A woman walked past it with a stroller. A man jogged by with headphones in. Nobody looked at it. Nobody reacted at all. Like it was not there, or like they could not see it, or like their eyes just moved around it naturally the way your eyes move around something your brain does not want to process. After about 10 minutes, it shifted. Not dramatically, not a sudden movement. It just slowly turned until it was facing my window directly. Facing me. And then it was still again. I stepped back from the window. I sat down on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet. the same way I had sat on the floor of the cabin in Alaska, and I stayed there for a long time. I thought about the 3 miles of dark forest road I had driven the morning I left the cabin. I thought about how certain I had been that I was leaving it behind, that it was tied to that place, to those trees, to that specific cold and remote corner of the world. I had been wrong about that. I called my sister that afternoon and told her I needed to stay with her for a few days. I did not tell her why. She lives about 40 minutes outside Portland in a small house with her husband and their 2 dogs. I drove there that same evening and stayed for almost 2 weeks. Nothing unusual happened while I was there. No shapes in the yard, no feeling of being watched, no waking up at 2 in the morning for no reason. Just normal, quiet evenings, and her dogs sleeping at the foot of the guest bed and the sound of the television from the living room. When I came back to my apartment, I told myself maybe I had imagined the shape in the park. Sleep deprivation, stress, the brain playing tricks. I had been through something genuinely frightening in Alaska, and it made sense that my mind would still be processing it. That was the reasonable explanation, the healthy explanation. I checked the park from my window when I got home. Nothing there. Just the bench and the oak trees and the late afternoon light coming through the branches. I have been back for about 3 weeks now. Things have been okay. Mostly okay. I started writing all of this down because someone in an online forum suggested that getting it out of your head and onto paper or a screen helps your brain stop chewing on it at night. I do not know if that is true yet. What I do know is that this morning I went down to my car in the parking garage under my building. It is underground, fully enclosed, no trees, no open spaces, just concrete and fluorescent lights and parked cars. The kind of place where nothing from a forest has any business being. I was almost to my car when I stopped walking. In the far corner of the garage, where the last fluorescent light was flickering slightly, something was standing between 2 concrete pillars. Tall, thin, perfectly still, with its head turned just enough that I could not quite see its face. Long arms resting at its sides. Not moving. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked back to the elevator, went upstairs, and sat down at my laptop. I am writing this right now. And I have not gone back down to the garage yet. I do not know what I'm going to do when I have to. Page 5. I stayed in my apartment for 2 days after the garage. I ordered food to my door, told my boss I was sick, and did not go near the parking garage or the window facing the park. I kept all the lights on. I watched television with the volume up loud enough to fill every corner of the room. I did not want silence. Silence was where my brain started doing things I did not want it to do. On the second night, I finally fell asleep on the couch sometime after midnight, with the television still running. I woke up a few hours later to one of those home shopping channels. A woman smiling and holding up a piece of jewelry, the sound low and steady and harmless. For about 30 seconds, I felt completely fine. Warm, rested, normal. And then my eyes drifted to the hallway on the other side of the room. The hallway that leads to my bedroom was dark. I always leave the bedroom light on now, so there is usually a thin line of light under the bedroom door at the end of the hall. It was there, faint but visible. I looked at it for a moment and started to relax. Then I noticed the shadow. Underneath the bedroom door, in that thin strip of light, there was a shadow breaking the line. 2 narrow shapes, close together like feet. Like something standing just on the other side of the door, right up against it, completely still. I did not move. I watched the shadow for a long time. It did not move either. The television kept going. The woman kept smiling and holding up her jewelry. And whatever was on the other side of my bedroom door just stood there, I want to tell you I did something brave. I want to tell you I grabbed something and went and opened the door. But I did not. I sat on that couch and I did not move a single muscle for what I think was close to an hour. At some point my eyes got heavy and I blinked, and when I looked back at the hallway the shadow was gone. Just the thin line of light under the door, unbroken. I did not sleep again that night. In the morning, I opened the bedroom door. The room was empty. Everything exactly where I had left it. Bed unmade, clothes on the chair in the corner, window curtains closed. Nothing unusual. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just looking at the room, and then I walked in and checked the closet and under the bed. Nothing. I sat on the edge of the mattress and put my face in my hands. I am not a person who scares easily. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters for understanding how serious this has become. I grew up camping. I have worked physical outdoor jobs my whole adult life. I have dealt with genuinely dangerous situations before and kept my head. But whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, it has found a way to get inside the part of me that stays calm. It is not scaring me with loud noises or sudden movements. It is just there, constantly, quietly, patiently there. And that specific kind of fear, the slow kind, the kind that builds so gradually you almost do not notice it until you realize you have not eaten a real meal in 3 days and you are afraid to walk down your own hallway. That kind is so much worse than anything sudden. I called a friend from my old job, a guy named Marcus, who I'd worked with before Alaska, and I told him most of it. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he asked me if I had talked to anyone professional about it. A therapist. I said no. He said he thought I should. Not in a dismissive way, not like he did not believe me. More like he was genuinely worried about me and did not know what else to suggest. I made an appointment for the following Thursday. I figured it could not hurt. Maybe there was something going on with me internally that was making me see things, or at least making me interpret normal shadows and normal shapes in a way that my frightened brain was twisting into something more. That was possible. I wanted it to be true. Thursday came and I drove to the appointment. The office was in a nice part of the city, a quiet building with plants in the waiting room and soft music playing. I sat across from the therapist, a calm older woman with glasses, and I started talking. I told her about Alaska, about the shape in the trees, about the camera stopping, about the photo I deleted. She listened without interrupting, taking small notes, nodding slowly. I was about halfway through telling her about the park when I noticed her eyes shift slightly. Just for a fraction of a second. Not toward me, but past me, over my left shoulder, toward the window behind where I was sitting. Her expression did not change. She kept listening. She kept nodding. But her eyes did not quite come back to mine the same way they had been before. There was something behind them now. Something careful and controlled, the way a person looks when they have seen something they have decided not to react to. I stopped talking mid-sentence. I did not turn around. I sat very still in that chair, and I looked at her face, and I knew, with every part of me, that if I turned and looked at that window, I would see it standing outside on the ledge 3 floors up, looking in. I did not turn around. I finished the session. I thanked her. I walked to my car with my eyes forward and drove home without the radio on. When I got back to my apartment, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop and started typing this, picking up from where I left off last time. I have been sitting here for about an hour now. I have not looked at the window behind me. I am not going to. I kept not looking at the window for the rest of that evening. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like the worst possible way to handle something. Just pretending it is not there, refusing to acknowledge it. But I had learned something over the past months without realizing I had learned it. Every time I looked directly at it, every time I confirmed it was there, something shifted. Like the act of seeing it gave it permission to move closer. The cabin window, then the park, then the garage, then my bedroom door. Each time I looked, the next appearance was closer than the last. So I stopped looking. I made dinner with my back to the window. I watched television facing the wall. I brushed my teeth staring down at the sink. I went to bed and pulled the covers up and closed my eyes and lay completely still. I do not know if it was outside that night. I chose not to find out. I slept better than I had in weeks. I know that sounds strange, but there was something almost relieving about making a decision, even a strange one, and committing to it fully. I could not explain it scientifically. I could not explain any of this scientifically. So I stopped trying and just did what felt like the right thing. For about 2 weeks, things were quiet. I went to work, came home, cooked, slept. I kept my eyes where I wanted them. I went back to the therapist once more, and we talked about anxiety and sleep and stress management. And I did not bring up the window again. She did not mention it either. We both just moved forward like two people who had silently agreed to leave something alone. Then Marcus called me. He said he had been thinking about what I told him, and he wanted to show me something. He asked if he could come over that weekend. I said yes. He showed up Saturday afternoon with his laptop and sat down at my kitchen table and opened a folder of screenshots he had saved from various forums and threads online. He had been researching quietly since our phone call. He is that kind of person. Methodical, thorough, the kind of guy who cannot let a loose thread go. He had found other people. Not many. Maybe 6 or 7 accounts scattered across different platforms over the past decade. But the details were close enough to make my skin tighten. People who had lived or worked in remote forested areas, mostly in the north, Alaska, northern Canada, parts of Scandinavia, who described a tall, thin figure that appeared at the edge of the trees at night. Always still, always watching, always getting closer over time. Several of them described the same feeling I had, that looking at it directly seemed to accelerate something. 2 of the accounts stopped posting mid-thread. Just cut off. No final update, no explanation. One person had written, in their last post before going quiet, that they had figured out it was not interested in frightening them, that frightening them was just a side effect of what it was actually doing. They did not explain further. That was the last thing they wrote. I asked Marcus what he thought it was. He was quiet for a moment, looking at his screen. Then he said he did not think it mattered what it was. He thought what mattered was whether it could be waited out, or whether it stayed as long as you stayed. He meant geographically. He meant, did it follow you? I told him about the park, about the garage, about the therapist's window. He closed his laptop slowly and looked at me across the table. We sat there for a while without talking. He ended up staying the night on my couch. Not because either of us suggested it directly. It just got late and neither of us moved toward the door. And at some point, I got him a blanket and pillow without saying anything, and he took them without saying anything, and that was that. I think we both felt better not being alone in the apartment. In the morning, I made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table again. And Marcus said he thought I should move. Not to another neighborhood, not to another city. Out of the country if I could manage it. Somewhere with no forests, no trees, open flat land as far as the eye could see. He was half joking when he said it. Only half. I laughed a little. It was the first time I had laughed in a while, and it felt strange in my mouth. Like a word in a language I had not spoken in a long time. After he left, I stood in my kitchen for a while. Then slowly, for the first time in 2 weeks, I turned and faced the window. The park across the street was empty. Bench, grass, oak trees, morning light coming through the branches. A man walking a small dog along the path. A kid on a bike. Normal and quiet and completely ordinary, nothing between the trees. I stood there looking for a long time. Long enough to feel something loosen slightly in my chest. Long enough to almost feel like maybe it was done, maybe it had moved on. Maybe whatever it wanted from watching me, it had finally finished getting. I went and got my coffee and came back to the window and looked again. Still nothing. I exhaled slowly, back, and then the man walking the dog stopped on the path. He had his back to me, facing the oak trees. He stood very still for a moment. Then he dropped the leash. The dog ran off down the path, but the man did not move, did not call after it, did not turn around. He just stood there facing the trees with his arms hanging at his sides, perfectly still. Just like it always stood. After about a minute, he shook his head slightly, picked up the leash, and walked on like nothing had happened. I stepped back from the window. I'm writing this now. It is Sunday morning. Marcus is not answering his phone. I do not know what the man in the park saw in those trees. I do not know what it showed him. But I think I am done waiting to find out what it wants. I booked a flight this morning. Somewhere flat, somewhere open, somewhere with no forests for hundreds of miles in any direction. I leave Tuesday. I told myself the same thing when I left Alaska. I know that now. I made it to Tuesday. I want to start with that because there were moments over those 2 days where I was not entirely sure I would. Not because anything dramatic happened. Nothing dramatic ever happens with this thing. It was the small moments. The ones that stack up quietly like weight on a scale, until the scale tips and you realize how close to the edge you actually are. Sunday night, I could not find my passport. I had put it in the top drawer of my desk 3 months ago when I moved in. I remembered doing it specifically because I told myself I was going to start traveling more, that I needed easy access to it, that this new chapter of my life was going to be different. And I opened that drawer Sunday afternoon and it was not there. I went through every drawer, every pocket of every bag, every folder in my small filing box. I turned the apartment over completely for about 2 hours. I found it, eventually. It was in my bedroom closet, tucked inside a shoe I never wear, pushed to the very back of the top shelf. A place I would never have put it. A place I have no memory of putting it. I sat on the closet floor, holding it for a long time. Monday was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the stillness before something, except the something never came. I packed my bag slowly and carefully. I did not sleep Monday night, just lay in bed watching the ceiling change color as car headlights moved across it from the street outside. I thought about the logging job, about the cabin, and about how genuinely happy I had been the first few weeks up there before everything started. I thought about how much I had liked the silence back then. It felt like thinking about a different person. My flight was early Tuesday morning. I called a cab instead of going to my car in the garage. I had not been back to the garage since the day I saw it between the pillars. The cab driver was a quiet older man who did not try to make conversation, and I was grateful for that. I watched the city slide past the window and tried to keep my breathing even. The airport was bright and loud and full of people, and I felt myself relax by small degrees the moment I walked through the doors. Security, gate, boarding. Each step felt like distance. Each step felt like I was putting something physical between myself and the past 8 months. Devasta had a window seat. I watched the city shrink below me as we lifted off, the grid of streets and buildings and tiny cars all pulling away. And then we banked, and I could see the edge of the city where everything just stops and the land opens up. Brown and flat and enormous, stretching out to the horizon with almost nothing on it. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. I slept on the plane. Real sleep, deep and heavy. The kind I had almost forgotten existed. I woke up when we landed, and for about 10 seconds, in that soft, confused space right after waking, I did not remember any of it. I was just a person on a plane, groggy and warm, with no weight on my chest at all. Then I remembered. The place I flew to is flat. I am not going to say exactly where because I am not ready to share that yet, and honestly, I am not sure it matters. What matters is that from the window of the small rental I found online, I can see in every direction for what feels like forever. Low scrub grass, a few scattered bushes, a road cutting straight through the middle of it all the way to the horizon. The sky here is enormous. At night the stars are so bright and so many that the darkness between them almost does not register. There are no forests here. I have been here for 11 days now. I sleep well. I eat well. I go for walks in the afternoon along the flat road, and I can see everything around me for miles, and there is nowhere for anything to stand without me seeing it immediately. That helps. That helps more than I expected. I have not seen anything. I have not felt watched. I have not woken up at 2 in the morning. I called Marcus 4 days after I landed. He answered this time, sounding normal, apologizing for missing my calls and saying his phone had died and he had lost his charger for a few days. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I asked if he was okay, and he said yes, fine, a little tired, but fine. I told him where I was and that things felt better. He said he was glad. We talked for about 20 minutes about nothing important, and it was the best conversation I had had in a long time. Before we hung up, he asked, casually, the way you ask something when you are trying to sound like it just occurred to you, if I had looked out the window much since I arrived. I told him yes, all the time. That was the whole point. Flat, open land, nothing to hide behind, and nothing between me and the horizon. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said good. Just good. And we said goodbye. I have been thinking about the way he said it for 4 days now. The pause before it. The specific flatness of his voice. The way it sounded less like relief and more like someone carefully choosing not to say something else. I told myself I was reading into it, that I had spent so long looking for signs of something wrong that I was starting to find them in completely ordinary things. A tired friend on the phone. A short pause. The word good. I told myself that. I am sitting at the window of my rental right now. It is just past midnight. The land outside is dark and open and still, lit faintly by the stars. I can see the road, the scrub grass, the flat empty distance in every direction. And I have been sitting here for 2 hours. I am watching the horizon. Because something occurred to me tonight that I cannot shake. Something I should have thought about sooner, but did not, because I was so focused on trees, on forests, on the dark spaces between trunks where something tall and thin could stand without being seen. I was thinking about what that person wrote online. The last thing they wrote before they went quiet. That it was not interested in frightening them. That the fear was just a side effect of what it was actually doing. I never stopped to ask what it was actually doing. I have been here for 11 days. Flat open land. Nothing to hide behind. Nowhere to stand without being seen. But I've also been sitting at this window every night for 2 hours, watching, completely still, with my eyes on the horizon. And I just realized something. I cannot remember the last time I moved. I moved my hand deliberately after I wrote that last line. I picked up my coffee mug, took a slow sip, set it back down, just to prove I could, just to confirm that the thought had been an irrational one, a tired brain spiraling at midnight the way tired brains do. And it worked. I moved fine. I was fine. I almost laughed at myself. But the thought did not go away. I closed the laptop that night and went to bed and lay there in the dark thinking about it from a different angle. Not whether it was doing something to me physically, but what it meant that I had been sitting at a window for 2 hours every single night since I arrived, watching the horizon without ever consciously deciding to do that. I had told myself it was caution, vigilance, the reasonable behavior of someone who had been through what I had been through. But I had not been anxious while doing it. I had not been scared. I had just been still and quiet and watchful, in the exact same way it was always still and quiet and watchful. And I had not noticed that until I wrote it down. I started paying attention after that. The next day I went for my afternoon walk, and I caught myself stopping at one point on the road and standing completely still, facing back toward the rental, for what my phone told me was almost 4 minutes. I had no memory of stopping. I remembered walking, and then I remembered being still, and the gap between those two things was just gone. I started setting a timer on my phone. Every 20 minutes, it would buzz, and I would check what I was doing. Most of the time, I was fine, moving around, on normal. But on 3 separate occasions over the following 2 days, the buzzer went off, and I was standing still somewhere. Once in the kitchen facing the back wall, once in the bathroom looking at nothing in particular, once outside in the scrub grass about 50 feet from the rental with no memory of going outside at all. Each time I came back to myself the same way. Gradual, soft, like waking up from a light sleep. No alarm, no fear, just a slow return. And each time I was facing a different direction, but my arms were hanging at my sides and my head was tilted very slightly, the way it tilts when you are looking at something far away. I called Marcus again. I told him what was happening. He was quiet for a long time. Then he told me something he had not told me before. He said that after I left, he had gone back to those forum threads he had found, looking for more accounts, and he had found one he had not shown me. A longer one, written by someone who had lived near a forest in northern Canada. This person had written extensively about the figure, about the progression of events, about eventually leaving and thinking they had escaped. The last few posts were different from the others. The writing had changed. The person described feeling calm, feeling better, feeling like things were returning to normal. They wrote about sitting by their window in the evenings and finding it peaceful. They wrote about how much they enjoyed the stillness. Their final post was 3 short sentences. They said they understood now what it had been doing all along. They said it was not hunting. They said it was teaching. And Marcus said he had not told me because he did not know what it meant, and he did not want to scare me before my flight. I told him I was not sure it would have changed anything. We were both quiet for a moment. I asked him what he thought it was teaching. He said he did not know. Then he said quietly that he had been finding himself standing still in his apartment sometimes. Not long, just a minute here and there. He had noticed it a few days ago and told himself it was nothing. I told him to set a timer. He said, okay. We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about the word teaching for a long time. It implies a student. It implies something being transferred from one thing to another. It implies that at some point, if the lesson goes on long enough, the student starts to resemble the teacher. I thought about the man in the park who dropped his leash and stood still facing the trees. I thought about how he shook his head after and walked on like nothing happened. An early lesson? A short one. Just a sample of whatever it was passing across. I had been in its classroom for months. I got up from the table and walked to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror for a while, just looking at my own face. I looked tired. Older than I remembered. But normal. Just a person. Just a face. Then I looked at my arms. I was standing with my arms hanging straight at my sides, completely still. And I did not remember putting them there. I raised my hands deliberately and pressed them flat against the bathroom counter and gripped the edge hard enough that my knuckles went pale. I stared at my reflection, and I said out loud to myself and to the room, to whatever might be listening, that I was not going to stand still anymore. I am writing this now at the kitchen table with every light on. I have the timer running. Every 20 minutes, I get up and walk a full lap around the rental, touching the walls, moving my arms, saying something out loud just to hear my own voice in the room. It feels ridiculous. I do it anyway. I booked a video call with a doctor for tomorrow morning. I am going to describe the blank episodes, the standing still without knowing, and see what they say. Maybe there is a medical explanation. Maybe there is something going on with my brain that has nothing to do with any of this. I want that to be the answer. I am choosing to pursue that answer first. But I also emailed those 2 forum accounts that went quiet mid-thread. Long shot, probably dead email addresses, probably nothing. But I sent them anyway. One bounced back immediately. Address no longer exists. The other one did not bounce.